Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen demands I pay her $20,000 hospital bills from having a baby. After that, Malicious Compliance cost company hundreds of millions of dollars. And after that, the customer is always right. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen has to pay her own medical bills. What the heck am I with you for then, Reddit boy? So please smash that like button. And subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen demands I pay her $20,000 hospital bills from having a baby. I, 28 female, just had my first baby 2 months ago. My sister, who's 33, had her third baby less than a week ago. Now to the relevant background. When I was 18, I came to France for an exchange program and I just fell in love with the country. Then I decided to go to college here, met my husband, and just moved here permanently. My sister hated the fact that I left the US. She took any opportunity she could to talk trash about where I moved to, about the way we do things here, and about my husband and his family, etc. It got to the extent that I went low contact with her. When I had my kid, my parents came to stay with me for a month. My mom was very impressed by the fact that we paid nothing to have this baby. I didn't have to pay for my checkups, my mandatory lab work, the birth itself, the hospital stay, and some postnatal care that included pelvic floor rehab. I didn't even have to pay for a preventative dentist appointment. Apparently, the same thing in the US would have cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. Anyway, they left directly to my sister's. She needed help, had some health scare, and they planned to stay with her until she gave birth, and then for a while after to help with the kids. I called to congratulate her when she gave birth, sent a gift and all of that. She was upset even then. Then yesterday she called me, told me that her hospital bills were over $20,000 because of some complications, and that it wasn't fair that I didn't have to pay anything at all. Apparently, my mom kept bringing up the fact that it was free for me. She said since I didn't have to spend a cent, then I can afford to help her, so she too can afford to stay with her kid instead of going back to work ASAP. Here's where I might be the jerk. Even though I could afford to send her a couple thousand, I refused to do so purely because of how much she looked down on my decision to move to France and marry a Frenchman. So all I told her was, sorry, I can't help you. But you are free to come give birth here next time you have a kid. Even as a foreigner, it won't cost you more than $3,000. She called me a condescending jerk and said she will be going no contact with me. So, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Your sister had 2 other kids. She knows the cost in the US. Your finances aren't tied to her in any way. She needs to keep her entitlement in her lane. Not the jerk. You're not responsible for others' medical bills. She's acting out of jealousy and selfishness. You can afford it is the dumbest reason to give a handout to someone who doesn't even deserve it. Malicious Compliance cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. So this is a story from someone I know. I've known this person for years, and while I don't work with them, I've seen this story play out more or less step by step. I know several people involved, but I'm going to tell it from the point of view of the person I know the best. So many years ago, this person, let's just refer to them as Person. Person got a really great job working for a Fortune 500 company. Not going to give any more specifics, but the company offered many benefits for their employees. They treated their employees like people and not like numbers. They offered a yearly raise to anyone who worked there. This was meant to do several things. First of all, it was meant to keep up with inflation so that employees wouldn't have to stress about money. I'm sure a lot of you know the struggle, waiting for minimum wage to be updated so you can start saving money to hold over till the next wage increase. No, the company was ahead of the curve. On top of that, when they did start hiring new employees for more, they increased the wage of anyone with that specific position by the same amount to keep older employees from earning less than newer employees. They offered many other benefits as well. Basically an awesome place to work at. Unfortunately, it's a small town, and the company wanted to expand that specific branch of operations. They couldn't do it here, so they chose to move out. They sold the branch office building along with the product that Person worked to another smaller company. When it was sold, the old company made the new company sign a contract which guaranteed that the yearly bonus would stay around, along with several other similar benefits. New company wasn't around very long and ended up expanding as well. They did the same thing, sold the location and product to another company. Unfortunately, they didn't care as much about their employees and only treated them well because of contractual obligations. So when they sold the location and product, it did not come with a contract. New company did care a little bit about employees, but ended raises and all of that. They would listen to employee complaints, but that was about it. They weren't around long either before the scummiest company came in and bought them out. So new company comes in and buys them out and immediately starts changing policies and shifting everything up to make everyone's jobs harder. Person and their team members got used to it and kept going. Now here's the thing about Person. Person works on a team of specialists. There are only about 12 people on the team and a manager that's one of them. Well, there was. I'll get to that. This team doesn't require any special education or anything, but it does require a several-week training course and several months of acclimation. The product is extremely delicate, and the customers for this product are extremely demanding. They more or less require perfection, anything short, and no money. You must watch every single word that you say to these customers, or they might write you off permanently. However, this is an extremely valuable product, and the company makes a lot of money from it, or at least they did. Let's speed forward about 10 to 15 years. The company has only found new ways to treat their employees less like humans since they took over and are somehow getting away with it. Turnover is high, but as long as they have high school grads looking for a job, then they can keep their building full. Unfortunately, Person and their team have asked for a raise several times at this point, but they were always being turned down because they are earning at market value for their position. Looked it up, and market value is determined by a simple equation that takes into account other people in your profession at your experience level and with your job title within about 100 miles and calculates average wage for them. Considering the extreme specialty of this position and being located in a remote region, market value is determined by calculating the average wage of everyone on Person's team. Basically, the company was saying, "Shut up, we aren't giving you a raise." Now, something to understand, Person and their team members weren't that disappointed not to get a raise every year. However, they were now making only a little more than a new hire with the company. And there are other companies that do similar but less specialized work in the area, but start people out with a higher wage than Person is making at this point. I literally knew high school grads with zero work experience that made more than Person did. Now at this point, Person has about 20 plus years of experience working the specific product, and the least experienced person on their team had been working in it for 12 years. The straw that broke the camel's back was an annual investors meeting that was streamed live to the entire company. Person, working on a small team, was invited to take a few hours off to watch the meeting. It was kind of a reward for them for performing so well. The company shot themselves in the foot with this one, though it was already starting to go south anyways. They just sped it up a little. So to put this into perspective for you guys, the company's total profit for that year, profit, not earnings, was a little over $1.2 billion. Out of that $1.2 billion, Person's team of 12, and a company hiring tens of thousands mind you, these 12 people and a manager brought in about $480 million. That's a little over a third of the company's total profits for the entire year. For those that don't like math, that's about $40 million per person of pure profit. Person specifically earned a little over $60 million alone. The lowest earner on the team was over $20 million. Seeing that they were single-handedly responsible for over a third of the company's total profit for the year, the entire team got together and demanded a raise. The manager actually put that in before they even said anything. Even their manager thought it was wrong. They demanded $20 an hour. They actually only wanted half of that, but since they were being lowballed and completely unappreciated by the company for the work that they did, they put in a higher number. By the way, $10 is about the amount they would have been making with their yearly bonus had it never been discontinued. As you might expect, the company, being money hungry, came back with the same response as usual. Didn't even try to negotiate. They asked several more times over the course of a few weeks, threatening to quit if they didn't get a raise, and the company basically just said, "Go on, anyone can do your job." Cue Malicious Compliance. They didn't all quit, only 3 of the 12, which if you've been keeping up, would add up to an average $120 million over 1 year. But that's not all. Actually, what they did ended up turning out even worse for the company. The rest of the team all agreed to only work their minimum requirements. The company had minimum requirements that everyone had to meet. This team, up to this point, being proud of the work they put in, consistently exceeded the requirements many times over. They would compete to see who could perform the best. The lowest earner on the team often exceeded minimum requirements by 3 times over. At the end of the year, the company had to painfully explain to investors why their highest earning department was now performing at less than half what it did the previous year. They came up with some stupid explanations. They still refused to give a raise though. Instead, what they decided to do was raise their minimum requirements. At first, the team kept up, but eventually, out of aggravation when their constant requests for a raise were denied, about half of the team requested transfer off. They were transferred to other departments and replaced with brand new employees, the most experienced of which had been with this company for about a year. The new employees struggled to keep up with the minimum requirements, which kept getting raised to meet stockholder expectations. Eventually, original members on the team had either quit or transferred to another department, even the manager. This left the team with only new employees who had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They completely alienated the vast majority of their former customers almost overnight, and if that wasn't enough, because they could not meet the extremely high demands of the company, still only a fraction of what the original team was performing, they were either let go or transferred to another department and replaced after only a few months on the team. Even hiring several times the number of employees on that team did nothing. When they reported an earnings of $80 million from that team, the company got so fed up with it that they just sold the product to another company for an enormous loss. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those "the company drove themselves out of business" stories, but I still think it's pretty funny, and I like to tell it to all of my new friends. I also use it to warn anyone who might be considering going to this company to work. Honestly, you'd think that if someone earns that much profit for your company, you'd at least try to keep them around. The customer is always right. About 9 years ago, I worked at a food service job within a retail store. The job was absolutely horrible, as I got written up for anything and everything I did. If I took my breaks, write up. If I didn't take my breaks, write up. I called out once with a doctor's note saying I absolutely could not work as my illness was highly contagious. Write up. This was my first time ever calling out, and I gave 48 hours notice. The second and last time was for my grandma's funeral, which I had requested off and was denied. I was written up then too. Any excuse my supervisor could find to write me up, he did. Being in high school at the time, I took this very personally and assumed that I had done something wrong. I worked there for 2 years, taking each write-up as a learning opportunity. However, I finally reached a point where I recognized that it wasn't my fault and the malicious compliance began. In this job, there were add-ons, and these add-ons came with an upcharge. I had customers complain to me constantly about not wanting to be charged extra, but normally they would just pay it and move on. One customer, however, refused to pay for the add-on but wanted it anyway. I pointed to the sign which said that it would cost extra and tried my best to politely explain to her that I can't give it to her without charging her. She demanded to speak to my manager. I happily called the manager over, as at the time the leader was also my area supervisor. Each day there was an overall leader which would cycle, but each department had their own supervisors as well. I'll call him Bob. Bob was employed through the retail store specifically. Regardless, I thought that surely Bob would have my back, as he knows the most about the rules that I had to follow. I was very, very wrong. After listening to the customer, Bob proceeded to yell at me in front of her, stating, "The customer is always right, and you are not paid to argue with her. Give her what she wants, and do not charge her for any of it." He also informed her that I would be written up for this, and I was. From that moment on, whenever a customer complained about having to pay for an add-on, I didn't charge them for it. If they demanded their items for free, stating that they didn't like them or had a bad experience in the past, I gave it to them for free. After all, the customer says that they shouldn't have to pay for it, so who was I to argue? Of course, he meant that I shouldn't argue to the point of the manager being called, but he didn't specify, and I didn't want to be written up for it again. Nor did I care to follow a "do as I mean, not as I say" policy anymore. It didn't take long for the people who worked in the actual retail store to learn that they could also get add-ons for free if they complained about it, as at the time they were ordering, they were technically customers. Since each add-on cost between 60 cents to $1, and most customers wanted more than one add-on, the company was losing an average of $2 to $3 per transaction on the add-ons alone, not even considering the customers who got their entire order for free. Of course, $2 to $3 doesn't seem like much, but it was enough to catch the attention of my district supervisor, who I'll call Ann. Ann was employed by the food service company, and her job was to oversee the branches that were inside retail stores. Ann was very nice and respected the employees who worked with her company, regardless of if they were employed directly by her company, as was in my case. She first asked Bob about why our location seemed to be less profitable than other locations and less profitable than it had been a few months previously. He tried to pin it on me, saying that I was stealing from the company by giving my friends and coworkers free items. And, understanding how serious of an accusation that was, insisted on speaking with me alone. I expected to be fired, but she instead asked me why profits had gone down. I explained to her what Bob had told me about the customer always being right, and how I had been written up and didn't want to be written up again, so I followed his instructions word for word. For the first time since starting this job, someone took my side. She agreed that not charging for those add-ons would explain the loss she was seeing, and that how Bob had handled the situation was unprofessional and entirely against policy. Having Bob accuse me of stealing to protect himself was my last straw, and I put in my 2 weeks' notice the same day. HR had apparently taken notice to how Bob was treating me, as her exact words were, "It's about time. I'm glad you're finally standing up for yourself." With my consent, she altered some of the dates to make my end date be a week earlier than it should have been since the schedule had not been written yet. To this day, I think of her as my guardian angel. Shortly after my last shift, I was informed by my friends that Bob no longer worked there as well. Anne was so upset with him that she called his supervisor and launched an investigation into his behavior. As it turns out, I was not the only one he would write up without a legitimate reason. They were also incredibly upset that he directly caused an unnecessary loss in profits. He could not blame me for it, as it was his words, and many people corroborated that he had said the same to them at one point or another. I was just the first to maliciously comply with his request, thus bringing his behavior to the attention of someone in a higher position than him. He was fired, effective immediately. Help my roommate rob us and make us homeless? After my son was born and my wife almost passed from pulmonary embolisms due to undiagnosed lupus eating her lungs, we finally managed to go on our first family vacation when my wife's health recovered. To preface this, we had to get a roommate to help with bills during this time, and a longtime friend was happy to help out and get a reasonable place to stay. Now, this is where Army Liar comes in. I had known this guy for almost 2 decades, spent entire summers at his family's place, and even lived with him on multiple occasions. I genuinely thought of this guy as my brother, cried in each other's arms type of stuff. But as dumb people do, he developed a massive ego after his parents paid his way through Colorado State University Pueblo. He started hanging out with the definition of giga-chads, and all of a sudden is nothing but politics and lying his butt off to get into the reserves officer training program for the Army at the college. This is important for later. Working out at the college with his bros, and generally being above hanging out with people who couldn't have a golden parachute from their parents. So Army Liar graduates, gets commissioned as an officer, and it's a shock when he wants to come hiking and partake of adventurous, generally wild college youth stuff. My roommate gets together with him, and through the wonders of the World Wide Web, we had a great time. I managed to decompress from my almost passing wife, as well as the struggles of being a new father. Now back to vacation. We visit family in Oklahoma. I had not seen my family in ages, and it's a great time. When we arrive back home, half the whole house is empty. There's a note from roommate that Army Liar helped him move all of his stuff out, and good luck. Understandably, this was a terrible turn of events. Any parent will tell you, you can't just plop some random in the now vacant room due to trust concerns and an infant present. Now I'm frantic at this point. Tons of our stuff is missing. Our marriage documents, birth certificates, lease, wife's 3DS, and more, all gone. I start blowing the roommate up, and Army Liar calls me. He proceeded to tell me he orchestrated it all because roommate was not really happy here and needed to move back to Central BFE, Texas from Colorado. I know, it's silly. I am obviously upset, but Army Liar was my chosen brother. Literally take a bullet for him. I explained that I'm missing all of the things I've noticed. This jerk has the nerve to say, "Yeah, not my problem." I was floored. He had spread some BS about me treating my roommate badly to his whole family, and they stopped talking to me. These are people who essentially raised me, housed me, and who were better parents than my own. I'll confess that I did something then that I was not proud of at the time. I told Army Liar that if he won't at least help me get my things back, I would have to contact his Army supervisor and explain how he essentially just helped to rob me. He laughed and told me to go right ahead. In the end, I caved and I didn't do anything. I was too mentally and emotionally exhausted. My wife was crushed, and my son was upset by our constant crying and worrying about how we were going to pay our bills. Ultimately, we lost our place and were forced to attempt moving back in with my parents, which was not a solution because my mom is a terrible human and had filled every available space with foster kids to game the state for money. We lived out of our car until I found a temp job in Houston, which ended and decided that they were done with the project I headed and terminated my position after telling me I would be moved to salary. Back to living in a car. This was the darkest time of my entire life thus far. I finally landed a stable job back in Colorado, was able to get counseling and rebuild our life in a way that depended on nobody but myself. Happiness actually came back into our lives. My 2-year-old son would never remember this darker period, and I made friends who put Army Liar to shame. But what's this? I hear from some old friends that Army Liar dropped them like old garbage and they missed him, wondering if I knew where to find him. And find him I did. Turns out that Army Liar got married and was traveling the globe as an Army officer, strongly exuding the 10 yards of my stuff don't stink vibes. I remarked to one of my good new friends who just left the Navy that I couldn't believe they gave Army Liar a security clearance with all of the things Army Liar had done in the past, which would disqualify such a clearance. My friend told me that Army Liar most likely lied and had his new bro friends do all of his interviews, because if the Army found out, they wouldn't have cleared him. Cue to the gears start turning. Turns out it's incredibly easy to get in contact with people who care in the Army. I talked through Army Liar's complete past, leaving nothing unsaid. I threw my own dignity to the wind and spilled every illicit detail of the shenanigans we were involved in as 18 to 23-year-olds, including the previous mentioned relaxing hiking trip, the one he took after his swearing in. Needless to say, guess who should pop up on my LinkedIn feed as transitioning out of the Army without a listed clearance? Now Army Liar and his wife live at separate addresses, and I'm sure that has nothing to do with forwarding his past full of legally questionable deeds to her good Christian cell phone number, but we will never know. I now go look at his obviously depressed face on LinkedIn anytime I'm feeling down. Don't ever let people convince you to forgive and forget. Burn those bridges down. They deserve it, and I promise it will be the best feeling you have ever felt. I know it was for me. Am I the jerk for saying my husband's friend cannot stay with us? Backstory. I'm 30, female, and my husband, who's 35, he has a friend, and she's 25. She came to stay with us over New Year. We live in London, and she's from Finland, and had come to the UK for a month with the last 5 days of her staying here with us. She got sick on day 3 with a cold and decided she was not well enough to fly home. Fair enough. 5 days later, she is still here, apparently had an open-ended ticket. I had my brother and sister-in-law due to stay with us a week after her originally leaving date, but she was making no moves to book tickets home or give us details of flights. We were supposed to get her to the airport. Husband and I were both frustrated at this point at a number of issues. 1. She kept reorganizing our living space to suit her. She has ADHD, and apparently how we had things arranged irritated her. 2. I cooked every night. She picked at the food and didn't eat, but sent my husband out at 11 p.m. for noodles because that's what she liked. 3. She kept one-upping me in conversation, and it felt like she was trying to show herself as a better version of me to my husband. 4. She didn't offer to pay for food or help clean up after herself. 5. We had no personal space. She was sleeping on the sofa all day and then up watching TV all night, so we had no space to relax ourselves after work. I finally had enough and nicely reiterated we needed her gone as we had visitors coming and our home wasn't big enough to house everyone, but in all honesty, I feel she would have just kept staying and staying if I hadn't pushed it. Husband was reluctant to talk to her about this as he was worried she would twist what happened and he would be ostracized from their mutual friend group. I have no such issue as it's his friend group and I'm not particularly involved in things they do. It was a very stressful time for both of us, but things went back to normal after she left. The problem is that my husband has just approached me asking if she can stay again in the summer while she attends some events. I've put my foot down and said no, and he says he will look like a jerk as she has nowhere else to go and can't afford a hotel, but I don't want a repeat of earlier this year. We are currently disagreeing on how to handle this, and I need an outside perspective that I'm not overreacting. Edit to add. Okay, so this is being asked a lot. No, I don't believe there's any sort of emotional affair going on. I had suspicions before she came to stay and confronted my husband and talked things out with him. I was satisfied that this is not that. However, I believe this friend likes playing the damsel in distress. She can't work due to medical issues and says that she lives with roommates in Finland in a bad living situation, but can't afford to move out. All the guys in the friend group have been sucked in by this and will support her, sending money and gifts. It's an online friend group that meets in the UK in person once a year. The ladies of the group seem to see right through this. I would love my husband to cut this girl out, but he can't do that without cutting off the rest of their friend group, which he doesn't want to do. I'm happy to be the bad guy and be blamed for why she can't stay. I just don't want her in our home again because it's 100% sucked the last time. Not the jerk. Why does your husband have a female friend a full decade younger than him? And why is that female friend so competitive with you? And why is your husband so afraid to be direct with his friend? So many questions that all lead to me thinking that you have a husband problem, not a husband's friend problem. Exactly. You hit it right on the head. I didn't want to mention the age thing, but I find it relevant because it's perplexing. Like, why is the husband running out at midnight and getting noodles for this person? Why was he willing to engage in a fight with his wife over this person staying with them? Why is he walking on eggshells with her in regards to telling her she can't stay? It's weird. Not the jerk. No, for all the reasons you listed, she can't stay. You might want to inquire as to why your husband is more concerned about her than he is about you. The notion that had you asked her to leave the first time, when you had other guests coming and given her terrible entitled behavior, it would have resulted in your husband being ostracized by a friend group is ludicrous to the point of not being credible. Why did your husband, in fact, not want to ask her to leave? Show him the list, tell him that not only can't she stay, she can't walk over the threshold of your house. Am I the jerk for telling my husband I hate my Valentine's Day gift? So for this Valentine's Day, my husband and I agreed that we weren't going to get each other any gifts and just focus on quality time together. My only exception was that he gets me flowers for the day. Nothing expensive or crazy, just a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite flower. I've always been vocal about my desire for flowers once in a while and try to make it easy for him to understand what I want. He doesn't get me flowers for our anniversary, my birthday, or any other special day of the year, and I just really wanted flowers for Valentine's Day. The day came up and we go out to eat and do other fun stuff, but the whole day I was waiting for him to surprise me with flowers. Instead, at the end of our dinner, he tells me he has a surprise, and it ends up being a pair of earrings. They weren't really my style, but I still tried to be really grateful for what he got me. When we got home, I couldn't hold it in anymore, and I asked my husband about the flowers. He said he didn't get them, and I responded by saying I would rather have them than these ugly earrings. I will admit my words were really harsh, but I'm really tired of him not listening and ignoring what I really want. So, am I the jerk for telling my husband I hate my Valentine's Day gift? Edit. Since Reddit won't let me respond to any of the comments, I just want to make some clarifications. I paid for our activities and he paid for the dinner. I also did explicitly say I wanted flowers, which is why I said it was an exception to our rule. I didn't get him a gift because we both unanimously agreed that we wouldn't exchange gifts. I even showed him a bouquet of daisies at the grocery store that were around $15 he could get me. I got so angry because flowers were the one thing I've been begging him to get me since the beginning of our relationship, and he's only gotten me flowers once. Another edit, since a lot of people are confused. He came up with the idea of no gifts because we get each other gifts all year. When we talked about it, I told him that was okay, and all I wanted were the flowers. He also agreed to that. I didn't get him a gift because he himself has said that he did not want anything. You were clear in what you wanted. He didn't listen, even though you made it really easy for him. And even though he tried, he didn't really do what matters in marriage. Listen to what your partner needs. That is frustrating after a while, and therefore I can understand the harsh words. Some will say you are petty, but it's not about the present, it's about the fact that he does not listen to what you want or need, and he is just ignoring it. Not the jerk. To never get someone a small bouquet of flowers when they have requested it is so odd to me. You were straightforward in communicating this with him. He doesn't have much of an excuse here. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. He knew darn well that you wanted and expected flowers. He's a passive-aggressive jerk who brought out the worst in you, and now he's playing victim. You're the jerk. Couple agrees on not getting each other gifts for Valentine's Day. Husband still gets wife earrings as a surprise, and she gets him nothing. Somehow he's still the bad guy, and you all bash him. And you wonder why smart, successful men are no longer wasting our time with marriage. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for naming my adoptive parents instead of my biological ones? This is kind of emotional for me, so please be nice, even if I suck here. I, 26 female, am all set to finish my PhD this year. Some of my published work has recently gotten press coverage in certain circles, and an article was even written about it in my hometown newspaper. In an interview, I was asked about my family, and I provided a picture of me with the people I consider my real parents, even though they've never legally been my parents. That's what prompted the controversy. My biological family is extremely religious, and they kicked me out when I was 17. My grandparents let me stay for long enough to finish school, but it was rough. I was able to scrape by and cobble together enough scholarships for college out of state, but I had a breakdown early in my freshman year because I was so stressed out in a big city for the first time, and I had literally nobody. There was a tiny restaurant off campus that was cheap and quiet, and I used to go there sometimes just to get away, and because the immigrant couple who ran it were always nice to me. After the lady asked if I was okay one day and I broke into tears, they kind of just adopted me. They talked me through my breakdown and had me over for dinner and on holidays and treated me just like one of their kids. I helped them with some things around the restaurant while I was in school. Their daughters are older than me, but we're friends, and I'm an auntie to their kids now. These people had no reason to take me in. We're not even the same race, but they did, and I introduced them as my parents now, and they call me their daughter. Once I'm established in my career, I plan to chip in to help them retire. I have kept some contact with my biological family, and the relationship has improved with time as my parents have mellowed out, and several of my younger siblings and other family have left the religion or become much less involved, but I can't forget being abandoned. They've been wanting me to come visit for a while, but I haven't. When they saw the picture of me with my adoptive parents in an article, they freaked out. Their argument is that they raised me, and they already apologized for kicking me out, so this is very hurtful. I think I wouldn't be doing my work without my adoptive parents' intervention, but they aren't my legal parents either. A lot of my biological family and friends are split on the issue. Some say I should have thrown my biological parents a bone since reconciliation is happening slowly. Not the jerk. Forget biological for a second. Couple A kicked you out at a vulnerable age for no reason. Couple B scooped you up and showed you unconditional love. You are not wrong either way, but it's clear why you chose the way you did. Congratulations on your hard-earned education. Congrats on finding a true family. I think it's really sad that parents so easily discount serious emotional pain. They don't realize that the damage done may never be healed. They need to accept what they did and live with the consequences. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.